Captain Sarah Martinez was enjoying her first shore leave in 6 months when the commotion erupted outside the spaceport cantina. Through the reinforced transparasteel windows, she watched a small crowd gather around what appeared to be a distressed alien. The creature, no taller than her waist, was frantically gesturing with 4 spindly arms while its translator unit crackled with urgent pleas. "Please! Someone must help! The Vorth have taken my mother!" Sarah set down her whiskey and stepped outside, her military instincts kicking in. The alien belonged to the Kethani species, peaceful traders known for their intricate metalwork and gentle nature. This one was clearly young, its iridescent scales still showing the soft blue hues of adolescence rather than the deep purple of maturity. "What's going on here?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying the authority that came from commanding a human destroyer for the past 8 years. The crowd parted respectfully. Humans had earned a unique reputation in the galaxy, not just as fierce warriors, but as the only species that seemed genuinely willing to help others without calculating profit margins first. The Kethani youth immediately turned toward her, its large compound eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Mighty human," the translator rendered in stilted galactic standard. "I am Zix'thara of the merchant vessel Gentle Current. 3 cycles ago, the Vorth raiding fleet attacked our convoy near the Helix Nebula. They took prisoners, including my mother, Elder Yith'sara. The Galactic Council says it's too dangerous to mount a rescue. The other species." The young alien's voice cracked. "They offer sympathy but no action." Sarah felt the familiar fire kindle in her chest. The Vorth were a scourge, slavers and pirates who preyed on peaceful traders. They were clever enough to operate just outside Council jurisdiction, taking what they wanted and disappearing into the lawless regions beyond the galactic rim. "The Vorth don't usually keep prisoners long," Sarah said gently. "Why hasn't the Council acted?" "The fortress ship they took her to, it's in the Maelstrom Cluster. The gravitational anomalies destroy most vessels that enter. The Council deems the risk unacceptable for the potential gain." Zix'thara's translator conveyed bitter disappointment perfectly. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking. The Maelstrom Cluster was indeed a death trap, a region where collapsed stars and dark matter created navigation nightmares that had claimed hundreds of ships over the centuries. But humans had something most species lacked, an almost pathological refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. "How long do we have?" she asked. The crowd murmured in surprise. Other aliens began backing away, not from fear, but from the recognition that when a human asked that question in that tone, impossible things were about to happen. "The Vorth usually process prisoners within 10 cycles of capture," Zix'thara whispered. "We have 7 cycles remaining." Sarah pulled out her comm unit and started scrolling through contacts. "I'll need detailed scans of the cluster, everything you know about Vorth fortress ship design, and the exact location where your mother is being held." You will help?" The young Kethani's voice rose to a squeak that needed no translation. "Kid," Sarah said, already composing messages to people who owed her favors. "You came to exactly the right species. Humans have a saying, nobody gets left behind. That goes double for somebody's mom." As word spread through the spaceport that a human was organizing a rescue mission into the Maelstrom Cluster, something remarkable happened. Other humans, merchants, mercenaries, even tourists, began approaching Sarah's impromptu planning session. Within 2 hours, she had volunteers offering everything from ships to weapons to technical expertise. Dr. James Wong, a xenobiologist on vacation, offered his research vessel with its advanced sensor array. Marcus O'Brien, a grizzled Marine veteran, brought tactical expertise and a network of contacts. Commander Lisa Park, captain of a human courier ship, volunteered her vessel and crew for what she called the kind of stupidly heroic shit that makes life worth living. By the end of the day, Sarah found herself commanding an improvised fleet of 7 human vessels and a diverse crew of volunteers who had signed up for what any rational analysis would call a suicide mission. But rationality had never been humanity's strong suit. As they prepared to depart, Zix'thara approached Sarah one final time. "Why?" the young Kethani asked. "Your people gain nothing from this. The risk is enormous. Why do humans do such things?" Sarah looked out at the ragtag fleet preparing for departure, then down at the alien who barely came up to her shoulder. "Because somebody's mom is in trouble," she said simply. "And because sometimes the right thing to do is also the crazy thing to do. Lucky for you, we're really good at crazy." The journey to the Maelstrom Cluster took 4 days through hyperspace, giving Sarah's volunteers time to plan, train, and get to know their unusual mission. The fleet consisted of her destroyer Indomitable, Dr. Wong's research vessel Curiosity, Commander Park's courier ship Mercury, 2 independent freighters, a salvage vessel, and a rather mysterious black-hulled ship whose captain would only identify himself as Smith and claimed to be between contracts. Zix'thara had initially insisted on coming along, but Sarah firmly but kindly refused. "You've given us everything we need to find your mother," she explained. "The best thing you can do now is wait at Nexus Station and be ready to help her recover when we bring her back." The young Kethani had reluctantly agreed, but not before transferring detailed intelligence about Vorth fortress ships to Sarah's databases. The data painted a grim picture. Massive vessels designed as mobile prisons and processing centers, heavily armed and shielded, capable of manufacturing everything from weapons to slave collars using raw materials and captured labor. "The good news," announced Dr. Wong during their final briefing, "is that the Maelstrom's gravitational chaos will make it just as hard for them to detect us as it will be for us to navigate." "The bad news," added Marcus O'Brien, studying tactical projections, "is that fortress ships are designed to be self-sufficient. They won't need to leave the cluster for supplies, so we can't wait them out." Commander Park leaned back in her chair, grinning. "Seems to me like we're overthinking this. We go in fast, hit them before they know we're there, grab the prisoners and get out. Classic smash and grab. Except for the part where the gravitational anomalies can crush our ships or scatter us across 17 dimensions," Dr. Wong pointed out. "Details," Park shrugged. Sarah studied the holographic display showing the cluster's shifting gravitational fields. No 2 passages through the region were the same. The constantly moving dark matter created an ever-changing maze of safe corridors and death traps. Most species had given up trying to map it after losing too many survey vessels. But humans were stubborn. More than that, they were adaptable. "We don't need to map the whole cluster," Sarah realized. "We just need to find one path in and one path out. Wong, your sensors are designed to detect gravitational anomalies, right?" "Among other things, yes. I use them to study stellar formation in nebular regions." "Perfect. You'll take point and guide us through." "Smith, I don't suppose that mysterious ship of yours has any useful capabilities you'd like to share." The enigmatic captain smiled slightly. "She's got a few tricks. Stealth systems, electronic warfare capabilities, that sort of thing. Nothing fancy." Sarah had a feeling nothing fancy was a considerable understatement, but she'd learned not to look gift horses in the mouth. "Good. You'll scout ahead once we're in the cluster, find the fortress ship's exact location. And then?" asked Captain Chun of one of the freighters. "Then we show the Vorth why kidnapping innocent people in human space was a really bad idea." The entry into the Maelstrom Cluster was unlike anything most of the crew had experienced. Space itself seemed to bend and twist around them as Dr. Wong's sensors painted a constantly shifting picture of gravitational currents and subspace distortions. The Curiosity led the small fleet through passages that opened and closed like living things, following routes that existed for minutes or hours before cosmic forces reshaped the local physics. "It's beautiful," whispered someone over the comm, and Sarah had to agree. The cluster was deadly, but it was also magnificent. Streams of ionized gas painted rainbow patterns across the void, while distant stars bent their light into impossible spirals. "Contact," announced Smith's quiet voice. "Fortress ship bearing 27 Mark 8. Approximately 400,000 kilometers. She's big, maybe twice the size of a standard dreadnought. Heavily armed, but her shields are configured for protection against gravitational shear, not weapons fire." Sarah felt the familiar calm descend over her as battle approached. "All ships, report status." One by one, her volunteers confirmed their readiness. Weapons charged, systems green, crews at battle stations. It should have been impossible. 7 ships with crews who barely knew each other, facing an enemy fortress in one of the most dangerous regions of space. But as Sarah gave the order to attack, she remembered something her grandfather had told her about the old wars on Earth. The enemy can predict everything except what you'll do when you've got nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The Vorth were about to learn that lesson the hard way. The attack began with Smith's ship simply vanishing from sensors. One moment the mysterious vessel was there, the next it had disappeared as completely as if it had never existed. Sarah made a mental note to have a serious conversation with Smith after this was over, if they all survived. Curiosity to fleet. Dr. Wong's voice crackled over the comm. I'm detecting massive power fluctuations from the fortress ship. They're trying to boost their gravitational shields, probably detected our approach. Won't do them much good, growled Marcus O'Brien from his position at the Indomitable's tactical station. Those shields are designed to keep gravitational forces out, not to stop weapons fire from getting in. Sarah studied the tactical display as her improvised fleet closed the distance. The Vorth fortress ship was indeed massive, an ugly, utilitarian construct that looked more like an industrial complex than a warship. Sensor scans revealed multiple prison blocks, manufacturing facilities, and what appeared to be slave processing centers. The sight made Sarah's blood boil. All ships maintain formation. We hit them hard and fast before they can organize a response. Remember, there are prisoners aboard. Watch your fire zones. The fortress ship began launching fighters, sleek, vicious-looking craft that moved like predatory fish through the twisted space of the cluster. But human pilots had been flying in impossible conditions since the first atmosphere-breathing ancestor had looked at the sky and decided it looked like fun. The volunteer pilots from Sarah's fleet met the Vorth fighters with a combination of skill, determination, and what could only be described as aggressive creativity. Commander Park's Mercury, built for speed and maneuverability, danced through the enemy formation like a leaf in a hurricane. Her pilot, a young hotshot named Rodriguez, had apparently decided that the gravitational anomalies weren't obstacles but advantages. He used the twisted spacetime to slingshot around Vorth fighters, appearing behind them at impossible angles. This is like flying through a funhouse made of physics. Rodriguez hooped over the comm as he dispatched his third enemy fighter. The larger ships focused on the fortress itself. Dr. Wong had repositioned the Curiosity to use its advanced sensors as a targeting system for the fleet, painting priority targets and weak points in the enemy's defenses. The salvage vessel, commanded by a pragmatic woman named Torres, had been equipped with industrial cutting beams that proved remarkably effective at slicing through Vorth armor. But it was the mysterious Smith who provided the breakthrough they needed. The fortress ship's main weapons were beginning to track the attacking fleet when something extraordinary happened. Every single system aboard the massive vessel simply stopped working. Shields flickered and died. Weapons powered down. Even the artificial gravity failed, leaving the ship's crew floating helplessly in zero-G corridors. That would be electronic warfare, Smith's calm voice reported. Their entire network is locked down. You have maybe 10 minutes before their backup systems come online. Sarah didn't waste time asking how Smith had managed to crash the systems of a vessel that outmassed his ship by orders of magnitude. All boarding teams go. Torres, I need cutting beams on their prison blocks. Wong, keep scanning for life signs. I want to know the moment we've found our people. The assault shuttles launched from multiple ships simultaneously, racing toward the disabled fortress. Sarah led one team herself because some things required personal attention. As her shuttle's cutting beam opened a hole in the Vorth ship's hull, she found herself thinking about Zix'thara waiting anxiously at Nexus Station. The interior of the fortress ship was a nightmare of industrial efficiency designed around cruelty. Corridors were too narrow for most species to move comfortably. Lighting was harsh and irregular, and the air itself carried undertones that spoke of fear and despair. Sarah's team moved quickly through the passages, following Dr. Wong's sensor guidance toward the main prison complex. They encountered their first Vorth defenders at a security checkpoint. The aliens were tall, predatory creatures with too many teeth and an attitude that suggested they'd never met a problem they couldn't solve with violence. They were about to learn that humans had considerably more experience with violence than most species preferred to acknowledge. The firefight was brief and decisive. Vorth weapons were designed for intimidation as much as lethality. They made impressive noises and frightening light shows. Human weapons were designed to stop threats as efficiently as possible. The difference in philosophy showed in the results. Prison complex secured, reported Sergeant Kim, one of O'Brien's Marines. Multiple species represented. Looks like they've been collecting slaves from all over this sector. Sarah moved through the cells, her heart heavy at the conditions they found. But when she reached the high-security section, she saw exactly what they'd come for. A small figure with purple-tinged scales, sitting with dignity intact despite everything she'd endured. Elder Yith'sara? Sarah asked gently. The Kethani female looked up with compound eyes that held both hope and disbelief. You are human? Yes, ma'am. Your son Zix'thara sent us. We're here to take you home. For a moment, the elder's composed demeanor cracked, revealing the fear and pain she'd been hiding. Then she straightened, her voice steady. The other prisoners. We're taking everyone, Sarah assured her. Nobody gets left behind. It's what we do. As her teams began evacuating prisoners to the waiting shuttles, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They'd pulled off the impossible again. But she knew the job wasn't finished until everyone was safely back in civilized space. And something told her the Vorth weren't going to let them leave without a fight. The evacuation was going better than Sarah had dared hope. Her teams had found nearly 200 prisoners from a dozen different species, all in various stages of the Vorth processing system. Elder Yith'sara had proven invaluable in organizing the rescued slaves. Despite her own ordeal, she immediately began helping coordinate care for the wounded and traumatized. Remarkable people, the Kethani, observed Dr. Wong as they loaded the last of the prisoners onto evacuation shuttles. She's been through hell, but she's more concerned about everyone else's welfare than her own. Sarah nodded, watching the elder comfort a group of young Zilani who'd clearly been captured recently. Her son is going to be so proud. Speaking of which, Smith, what's the status on those backup systems? The mysterious captain's voice came back immediately. About 3 minutes until their primaries come back online. We need to go. Now. But as Sarah's teams began their final withdrawal, the fortress ship's external sensors suddenly blazed to life. Warning klaxons began sounding throughout the massive vessel, and worse. Much worse. Sarah's tactical display lit up with new contacts. Fleet Command. This is Mercury. Commander Park's voice carried new urgency. We've got company. Big company. Vorth reinforcement fleet just dropped out of hyperspace. Count is 12 heavy cruisers and a battleship. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. A Vorth battleship was a mobile fortress in its own right, designed to overwhelm any opposition through sheer firepower. Her improvised rescue fleet had been perfectly adequate for hitting one disabled fortress ship, but against 13 fresh warships. All shuttles, emergency extraction. Get those prisoners to the fleet ships immediately. All combat vessels. Prepare for engagement. Sarah. Dr. Wong's voice was quiet but urgent. The gravitational currents are shifting. That safe passage we took to get in here, it's going to collapse in about 20 minutes. After that, we're trapped until the cluster reconfigures itself. How long? Could be hours. Could be days. No way to predict. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, doing rapid calculations. 20 minutes to get 200 rescued prisoners evacuated and reach the exit passage, while fighting off 13 Vorth warships in the twisted spacetime of the Maelstrom Cluster. All ships, this is indomitable. We have a situation. Priority 1 is getting those prisoners out alive. Combat vessels will hold the line while evacuation proceeds. Begging your pardon, Captain, came Marcus O'Brien's gravelly voice. But we're outnumbered roughly 3 to 1 by ships that outgun us individually. The math doesn't look good. Since when has math ever stopped humans from doing something stupid and heroic? Sarah replied. Besides, we've got advantages they don't know about. Such as, we're fighting in a gravity maze that changes every few minutes, we're protecting people instead of property, and we're really pissed off that they kidnapped somebody's mom. The battle that followed would later be studied at military academies across the galaxy as an example of how tactical flexibility and sheer determination could overcome overwhelming odds. The human fleet used the Maelstrom's chaotic gravity wells as both weapons and shields, leading Vorth ships into gravitational shears that crushed their hulls or scattered them across multiple dimensions. Commander Park's Mercury played a deadly game of cat and mouse with 3 Vorth cruisers, using micro-jumps through unstable wormholes to appear behind enemies at impossible angles. The salvage vessel Tenacious, under Captain Torres, proved that industrial equipment could be remarkably effective in combat. Her mining charges, deployed as improvised torpedoes, punched through Vorth shields with devastating effect. But it was Smith's ship that turned the tide. The mysterious vessel reappeared just as the Vorth battleship was preparing to obliterate the evacuation shuttles. Instead of the small courier everyone thought they'd been flying alongside, Smith's ship revealed itself as something far more sophisticated. A stealth destroyer equipped with weapons that shouldn't have existed and defenses that bordered on the impossible. "Sorry about the deception." Smith's voice remained calm even as his ship single-handedly engaged the Vorth battleship. "Let's just say some of us have been watching human space for a while, and we approve of what we've seen." The battleship, massive and heavily armed, found itself fighting an opponent it couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't hit. Smith's weapons, whatever they were, punched through Vorth shields like they weren't there, while return fire simply seemed to pass through empty space. 10 minutes to passage collapse, Dr. Wong announced. "All prisoners are aboard fleet vessels, but we're still engaged with 8 enemy ships." Sarah made the hardest decision of her career. "All ships, immediate withdrawal. We're done here." "Captain, we can finish them." "Negative. We came here to save prisoners, not to fight a war." "Mission accomplished. Let's go home." The withdrawal through the collapsing gravitational passage was harrowing. Space itself seemed to be unraveling around them as massive dark matter currents shifted position. Dr. Wong's sensors painted a nightmarish picture of closing corridors and forming gravity wells that could trap them forever. But somehow, through skill, luck, and the kind of stubborn refusal to accept defeat that characterized their species, the human fleet made it through. Behind them, the safe passage collapsed completely, trapping the surviving Vorth ships in the Maelstrom until the cluster's physics reorganized themselves. As they entered normal space, Sarah finally allowed herself to breathe. They'd done it. Against all odds, against military logic, against common sense. They'd pulled off a rescue that would be remembered for generations. "This is Elder Yith'sara," came a familiar voice over the comm. "I do not have words for what your people have done. The debt can never be repaid." "No debt," Sarah replied firmly. "That's what neighbors do for each other. Besides, wait until you see your son's reaction. I think that'll be payment enough." The reunion at Nexus Station was everything Sarah had hoped it would be. Zix'thara's excitement as the rescue fleet approached was visible even from the Indomitable's bridge. The young Kethani was practically vibrating as he watched the docking procedures through the station's observation ports. When Elder Yith'sara finally stepped off the shuttle, the emotional reunion between mother and son brought tears to the eyes of hardened spacers from a dozen species. The translator units couldn't capture the musical harmonies of Kethani emotional expression, but no translation was needed for the pure joy and relief that radiated from both aliens. "You did it?" Zix'thara kept repeating to Sarah, his 4 arms gesturing expansively. "You actually did it." The mighty humans kept their promise. But the real surprise came when representatives from the Galactic Council arrived at Nexus Station just hours after the fleet's return. Sarah had expected criticism, maybe even sanctions for operating outside Council jurisdiction. Instead, she found herself facing a delegation that seemed genuinely amazed by what her volunteers had accomplished. "Captain Martinez," announced Counselor Vextheri, a dignified Altarian whose species served as the Council's diplomatic corps. "We have reviewed the recordings and testimonies regarding your expedition. The rescue of nearly 200 prisoners from the Maelstrom Cluster represents an unprecedented humanitarian achievement." Sarah shifted uncomfortably. She'd never been good with formal recognition. "We just did what needed doing, Counselor. Any decent species would have done the same." "Would they?" The Counselor's expression was thoughtful. "In the past cycle alone, 17 separate incidents of Vorth raiders taking prisoners have been reported to the Council. In each case, the affected species petitioned for intervention. In each case, the Council determined that the risks outweighed the potential benefits of rescue operations. With respect, Counselor, I think your risk assessment needs work. The Altarians' gill slits fluttered, their equivalent of laughter. Indeed, which brings me to why we're here. The Council would like to make you an offer. What followed was the kind of bureaucratic discussion that made Sarah's teeth ache. The Council wanted to formalize human involvement in rescue operations, create official protocols, establish proper chains of command. All the things that would turn spontaneous heroism into regulated procedure. I appreciate the offer, Sarah said finally, but I think you're missing the point. What we did worked because it wasn't official, because nobody had to fill out forms in triplicate or wait for committee approval. Sometimes the right thing to do is also the immediate thing to do. Dr. Wong, who had been quietly observing the discussion, spoke up. If I may, Counselor, I think what Captain Martinez is trying to say is that heroism can't be bureaucratized. You can't create a regulation that says, be brave, or risk everything for strangers. But surely some form of organization already exists, interrupted Commander Park with a grin. It's called humans. We've got a whole species of people who think impossible is just another word for challenging. The formal negotiations continued for several more hours, but Sarah knew the Real resolution had already taken place in the reunion between a mother and son. As the Council representatives debated jurisdiction and protocols, she slipped away to the station's observation deck where Elder Yith'sara and Zix'thara were watching ships come and go in the busy space lanes. Captain Martinez, the Elder turned as Sarah approached. I hope you do not mind the intrusion, but I have been researching human customs. I understand that in your culture, there are rituals for acknowledging great debts. Ma'am, I already told you. Please. The Kethani's voice carried gentle authority. Among my people, a life debt can only be properly acknowledged through the ritual of eternal gratitude. It requires the debtor to offer something of great value, not as payment, but as a symbol that the debt is recognized and remembered. Elder Yith'sara reached into her carrying pouch and withdrew something that made Sarah's breath catch. It was a piece of jewelry, a pendant crafted from some kind of crystalline material that seemed to hold starlight within its structure. The workmanship was exquisite, clearly the product of centuries of artistic tradition. This has been in my family for 47 generations, the Elder explained. It was crafted by my ancestors on the original Kethani homeworld, before we became a spacefaring people. According to our legends, it will bring protection and good fortune to whoever wears it. I can't accept this, Sarah protested. It's a family heirloom, which makes it the perfect symbol. Zix'thara interjected. Mother, may I explain to Captain Martinez why this is so important? At the Elder's nod, the young Kethani continued. In our culture, family is everything. When you rescued my mother, you didn't just save her life. You preserved our family line, our history, our future. The pendant represents that continuity. By accepting it, you become part of our family's story forever. Sarah looked at the pendant, then at the two aliens who had trusted her with something more precious than their own lives. Finally, she bent her head and allowed Elder Yith'sara to place the chain around her neck. Thank you, she said simply. No, Captain Martinez. Thank you. Later that evening, Sarah found herself in the same cantina where the whole adventure had begun. Most of her volunteer crew was there, sharing drinks and war stories with anyone willing to listen. The mysterious Smith had vanished again, but not before leaving a message with the bartender. Tell the humans that some of us have been watching and we're impressed. We'll be in touch. Dr. Wong raised his glass as Sarah approached. To the successful completion of an impossible mission. To somebody's mom getting to go home, Commander Park corrected. To humans being humans, added Marcus O'Brien. Sarah lifted her own glass, feeling the weight of the ancient pendant against her chest. To the idea that sometimes the right thing to do is also the crazy thing to do. As they drank, Sarah noticed that word of their mission was already spreading. Representatives from other species were approaching human tables, sometimes hesitant, sometimes desperate, but all carrying the same basic message. Please, mighty human. Someone I love is in trouble. Can you help? And Sarah realized that what they'd started in the Maelstrom Cluster was bigger than one rescue mission. They'd reminded the galaxy that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the odds. That sometimes the most advanced technology was less important than the willingness to risk everything for a stranger. That humanity's greatest export wasn't technology or trade goods, but hope. You know, Sarah said to her companions, I have a feeling we're going to be busy. Across the cantina, Zix'thara was already deep in conversation with a desperate-looking Vraxian whose mate had been taken by slavers. The young Kethani caught Sarah's eye and nodded, a gesture that needed no translation. The message was simple, ready when you are. Sarah smiled and finished her drink. Tomorrow there would be new impossible missions, new desperate pleas, new chances to prove that the universe was a little brighter when people were willing to help each other. Tonight, though, she was content to sit with friends and savor the knowledge that somewhere in the galaxy, a mother and son were together again because a group of humans had decided that impossible was just another word for hasn't been done yet. The pendant caught the cantina's lights, throwing tiny rainbows across the table. 47 generations of Kethani history, now part of humanity's story. Sarah touched the crystal gently and made a silent promise. As long as humans drew breath in the void between stars, nobody's mom would face the darkness alone. After all, that's what neighbors were for.